Welcome back to the Mat Return. I'm AJ Piazza.
I'm Andrew Deal.
And I'm Evan Smith.
And this episode, we will be reviewing the Big Ten championships and previewing the national championships. Evan, what stood out to you for Luke Liljedahl at the Big Ten championships?
He just looked like I don't want to say an entirely different wrestler, but he looked like he did against lower tier opponents, against basically everybody that he faced. Specifically, Matt Ramos came in ranked number 1, undefeated. And I figured Liljedahl would put up a fight. I didn't expect him, A, to beat him, and let alone to major decision him. So now he's up as the number 1 wrestler, and after that weekend, you can't really deny it.
Yeah, you could really tell something was going right for Liljedahl throughout the entire tournament. He won by fall over Kalen Riley from Illinois in the first round. And then major decision, Joey Cruz from Iowa. So he had a lot of momentum heading into the match, the unprecedented match against Matt Ramos. And Ramos kind of was struggling going into that, and Liljedahl just took full advantage and looked like the number 1 guy compared to Ramos kind of looking like the guy that didn't necessarily know what he was doing there yet.
Yeah, Liljedahl definitely was more dominant than I thought after looking at this. And you look at those wins over Ramos and even Caleb Smith, who were ranked higher than him, and he really was in complete control of that Ramos match. I mean, I think with Ramos, though, he's very aggressive, and Liljedahl's defense was very good in that match, and he was really able to just control Ramos on the mat. But he's very confident. As we heard him at media today, he said he's going to show why he's the best in this weight class, and maybe it's starting to look that way. Big Ten champion in his first year, and had some impressive wins as well, even throughout the season, and this too. So let's look at his national championship path. He's the number 1 seed, going up against either Marcelo Miliani or Caleb Wayland. And Liljedahl really comes into this, I think, higher than people think, but what he has potential to be. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I don't want to throw water on this fire, per se, or throw any disses later in the lineup. But if you don't remember, Braden Davis was the number 1 at 125 last season, entering this championship too, and he ended up going 1-2. So it's not necessarily being number 1 is like this true blessing. With that said, though, I think Luke's going to perform better than that and get pretty far through the bracket. There is a lot of top contenders, though, at 125 that he's going to have to face down the line. The ones that scare me the most, outside of Matt Ramos, obviously, but Luke's shown that he can beat him, would be Vincent Robinson, number 4, and the past national champion, Richard Figueroa, at number 5. I believe he's got to face one of those two in the semifinals as long as the rest of the bracket doesn't go quite too haywire. So he's got his work cut out from him just to make it back to the championship. And then Matt Ramos, he did major him. It's not going to be an easy match, though.
Yeah, I actually think you could see Liljedahl thrive when facing non-Big Ten opponents. Big Ten, clearly the best conference in the entire country. But he said in media today that he wants to face guys that he hasn't faced before. It almost seemed like he was, I don't want to say tired of facing the competition in the Big Ten and tired of beating them, but that's kind of where he was at. He wants to face guys he hasn't faced before. That's why I think he really thrived against Matt Ramos, because he hadn't faced them yet. And his first matchup could be against a Big Ten guy, or it could be against a Cornell guy. And then going down the line, if he wins that first match, he'll face a non-Big Ten guy. And then it's really up in the air from there, depending on what happens, because, it's national championships. Anything can happen. We kind of saw it in the Big Ten championships as well, with some surprises. And there's great competition. Some guys have fallen recently, like Richie Figueroa, and obviously Ramos because of the Liljedahl. But I think he's going in with a ton of confidence, and that's really going to help him in this path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that mindset of wanting to face different opponents isn't just him. I think that's a lot of people. He only faced one new opponent at the Big Ten championships, and that was Ramos. And obviously he thrived in that matchup. But with this, obviously you want to get... I think it's a little... I don't want to say boring, but it can be when you're just facing the same guy over and over, and you already know how to prepare for that guy if you're, beating him a bit consistently. And for this, it could be a new challenge. And as you just said, anything can happen at the national championships, and he'll be facing a lot of different guys that he's really never seen before. But what do you think is the furthest that he can go?
I mean, the furthest he can go is the national champion.
Yeah.
He's ranked number 1 for a reason. It's not a sure thing, but there's no limit to that. And I honestly think almost the whole lineup you can say the same for.
Yeah, he's the betting favorite for a reason, and he's won the Big Ten championship. There's been people have said sometimes that's even harder than winning the national championship, and he already has Big Ten championship under his belt. He can go all the way here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he can definitely go all the way, and I believe that most Penn State wrestlers out of these 10 can go all the way, but the next guy we're going to get into here at 133 and recap his Big Ten performance is Braden Davis, who was the Big Ten champion at 125 last year, and this year he's really struggled at 133. Just what were your thoughts of his performance at the Big Ten this year?
He just continued to be inconsistent, which has kind of been the problem all year. You hope he's healthier going into the national championships, but you got told he was going into Big Tens as well. The one match that concerned me was his last match where Nick Buzakis caught him in a pinfall, and it's the same exact move that he used at Ohio State that got him this close to getting pinned as well. Granted, Buzakis is known for that that groundwork, but when you get caught twice in the same thing, when a lot of these other wrestlers, for example, Carter Strachey talked about how he's got all 57 scouted, which honestly I don't doubt is true. It's just kind of concerning seeing that happen back-to-back times against Buzakis, who's not necessarily a higher-tier kind of guy. So, got to hope Braden Davis is in the right place, in the head and physically, heading into this weekend in order to jump that 8 seed, stay an All-American.
Yeah, just real quick. What do you think it is with Davis? Do you think it's mentally, or do you think he's still a little injured just from earlier this season?
Part of me thinks maybe that Buzakis match ended up being a mental thing. But I do think he's not fully healthy yet compared to the rest of the lineup, maybe. It's hard to tell because it's kind of been all season he never looked like that next tier guy like he did last season.
Yeah, I want to say Kale today said that he needs to focus on like the little things. Like it's nothing big that he's like obviously lost by fall to finish 4th in the Big Tens, but it's a certain small movement that made him lose by fall that he could maybe correct, and then that propels him further. But throughout the Big Tens, the inconsistency was really notable, and he wasn't fully aggressive. Like the match, whenever he was still in the championship bracket against Dylan Shaver, he didn't look like he was ever fully going to go for an attack or anything like that, and Shaver was able to just win 3-1. But then he ended up putting up a bunch of points in the consolation bracket and get all the way to 4th place. So there's that inconsistency again where he picked up the consistency to be able to work his way back to 4th place. And if he remains consistent, I will say he's a threat to some of these wrestlers.
Yeah, I think it's just been an up and down season for him, obviously with those injuries, and at some point that does a toll on your mental game, especially in wrestling. And he just really, I think a lot of fans expected him to take that next step at 133, especially with how much promise he showed at 125, and he really just hasn't found that next step yet. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that at the national championship, this week. And at the Big Tens, he really just. He was even inconsistent in the matches he had there. He was some of them he was very aggressive and going for takedowns instantly, and some of them he really didn't even attack. So it's just interesting to see what Braden Davis will get at the national championships. And depending on the Braden Davis, where do you think he could fall at the national championships?
I think he's got the biggest range of outcomes in the lineup, especially with 133 being a really deep bracket. Davis really has no breaks per se, because even his second-round matchup against Braxton Brown, but remember correctly, Davis didn't wrestle in that Maryland match, so we haven't seen that.
He wrestled him in the Big Tens, though, and he beat him 9-7, but it was a close match. So
yeah, close match, and Brown 23-4 on the year, so that's not an easy situation. Braden Davis could realistically be the only wrestler who's I can see being in danger when you reach the blood round of not being an All-American. But he can also easily jump into that top 4, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the semifinals as well.
Yeah, it comes down to the push right now for Penn State is 10 All-Americans, and I think when you look at things, he is the one that is up in the air. And you get to the Friday morning round, which would be 16 wrestlers, 8 wrestlers left, with a chance of the championship. If the higher seeds win all the way through, he would have to face Lucas Bird, who has looked unstoppable recently and even was able to pin Drake Ayala in the Big Ten championship. So I think if he gets that far, that's where it stops, and then he'll have to work his way back to try to get into All-American status.
Yeah, just on Lucas Bird, just wanted to remind you that I picked him to win the Big Ten championship, and he did. And, Evan, you were laughing at me, so ha, ha, ha. But, yeah, I think it just all depends on which Braden Davis we get. The one that we see that attacks or the one that kind of stays back and is even a little timid at times. But if he has to go against Lucas Bird, Bird beat him, I believe, earlier this season in pretty, dominating fashion. But he's the guy that I can see really being up in the air as well. Like, I agree with you guys. I wouldn't be shocked if he was in that, final 8, but I'd also wouldn't be shocked if he lost before that. It just depends on which Braden Davis we see come national championship time. Moving on to 141. Bo Bartlett, a little bit of an upset there at the Big Ten, and how does that affect him going into national championships? Evan, what is your thoughts?
See, I don't think it will affect him based on the fact that he made it through to the third-place match and got his matchup with Jesse Mendez again and won again. So I feel like that's enough confidence for him. And as much as you want that Big Ten championship trophy, listen to these guys speak. They don't care about that at all compared to the national tournament. So of all people, Bartlett's going to be the guy who can easily block that out of his mind. It does mean he's got a tougher path. And if you kind of look at it before the Big Ten, or not Big Ten, just all the conference championship weekend, there was really only like 2 contenders. You thought Bartlett versus Mendez with a throw-in. Now you got 8 guys after those results you can see easily jumping in there. Brock Hardy upset Mendez. He could be the guy. Vance Vaughn upset Bo Bartlett. He could be the guy. And then out of the conference, the number 8 seed is last year's national champion and Andrew Alirez. So those top 8, it's kind of all a hodgepodge that you can easily see upsetting anyone in there. Might be the most entertaining bracket out of all of them.
Yeah, he is set up in the 2 seed, and going into the Big Tens, everyone was ready for Bartlett Mendez Big Ten championship. We get Bartlett Mendez for 3rd place. Here, best you could do is Bartlett Mendez in the semifinals, because Mendez is the 3 seed, Bartlett's 2 seed. They cannot face in the championship. They will cross paths before that. If they even make it there, this is a tough, very tough path. And looking at it, Vance Vaughn beat Bartlett. He would have to face Mendez before Bartlett if that were to happen. And Bartlett's second round matchup isn't necessarily an easy one either. If 15 seed Joseph Olivieri wins, Bartlett only beat him 4-2 in the consolations. So a close matchup can still change how everything plays out if, say, Olivieri is able to get one on Bartlett, even though we've seen throughout the season that it's really hard for Bartlett to give up a lot of points. He's really good defensively.
Yeah. For me, I believe that the Big Ten championship and that the national championship would be the same 2 wrestlers, Jesse Mendez, Bo Bartlett, before seeing last weekend. Now, there's a ton of guys that could win it. And I think the Bo Bartlett we've seen as of late is more aggressive than what we saw in the earlier this season. And we've mentioned that a few times, but his path in the national championship is not going to be easy at all. As you just said, Olivieri, that was a close match, and honestly, it could have gone really either way. And this was one that, again, as I just said, I really thought Bartlett was almost a lock to put in the national championship, but now I really don't know, because Vance Vaughn is another guy. There's just so many different names now that have popped up after that Big Ten championship that I don't think he's really necessarily favored to go all the way.
Kind of up in the air. Kind of answer the question that I think you're going to ask of how far he's going to go. I think it's national championship. I think he can win it.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, he did defeat Brock Hardy in the regular season.
Yes.
So having that win over the number 1 seed will play a factor in knowing the weaknesses of Hardy. If Hardy even makes it that far, Hardy's looked really good, 23-3. But this one, I mean, in the quarterfinals, he might have to face the reigning national champion. So that all plays a factor, and you may not even see the championship. I think this one, there's a better chance of not seeing 1-2 in the championship than the rest of them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Evan. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think he does top out as the national championship favorite. But you said he was the betting favorite?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's like plus 150. Mendez is plus 220 something. So, I mean, it seems like fate that we're getting that in the semifinal. Granted, I said the same thing for the finals of the Big Ten championships, and I was technically right with an asterisk on it. So, but there's really not much of a threat that I can see to him up until the semifinal. Just looking down that bracket, just based on how he's performed, as long as he's in tournament form, which seems like they all are. Kel Sanderson, a lot of his talk today was about peaking at the right times, and Bartlett certainly peaked up towards the end.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree. I think I could see Bartlett going to the national championship. I could also see him not going. I'm not going to say it's necessarily a shoo-in. This weight class is way more competitive than I think, honestly, all of us might have thought, especially after last weekend. But I could definitely see him winning it, at least being there for the national championship. Now, at 149, in a bit of a shocking late second loss, Shane Van Ness, he looked solid at the Big Tens and is still obviously, I believe he's also the favorite at 149 for the national championship.
Yes, he is. I'm actively trying. Oh, he's the 3 seed. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, he's the 3 seed. Was, I believe, the 1 seed at the Big Tens. Lost to Cannon Webster in what definitely seems to be a bit of an upset. What are your thoughts on that performance?
Yeah, the main takeaway for me in that was Van Ness was the stronger wrestler. Cannon Webster was the longer wrestler, I guess you could say.
He was very lanky.
He's very lanky. He was a lot skinnier, I guess you could say. I'm not calling Shane Van Ness fat or anything like that. He's more muscular, but I think the length of Webster was able to play an advantage where he longer reach, was able to stride further than most wrestlers, so you couldn't really see the power of Shane Van Ness shown off. But he bounced back big time with 2 major decisions over Andrew Clark and Kyle Parko that really showed there's nothing to worry about with Shane Van Ness.
Yeah, and I think that Parko win kind of exemplifies it. He destroyed Parko and knocked him out of the discussion of Parko being a true favorite in this weight class for the national championship. So the loss happens, and it, quite frankly, wasn't as bad as the loss he suffered early in the year with that third-round collapse against Ridge Lovett. I do think, though, it kind of works to his advantage, because looking at this bracket, out of the top 4, to me, it looks like Shane Van Ness ended up with the easiest path to the semifinals. There's no names that really stand out, whereas in all the other quadrants, you got, like, Cannon Webster would have been a threat. He goes against Ridge Lovett in the quarterfinals, if all things go to plan. And then up towards the top end of the brackets where they have the rest of the notable 149 names. So in a deep weight class, Shane Van Ness kind of lucked himself out with a loss.
Yeah, I agree with you, Evan. I think this actually might have played out better for Van Ness when it comes to the Nationals bracket. And, you talk about that. His side of the bracket really doesn't have a ton of threats. I basically am just reiterating what Evan said, honestly. I have nothing new to say. But you really hit the nail on the head there. This actually could really benefit him to his path to the national championship and maybe even get him to win it.
I am surprised, though, that he is the betting odds favorite.
Yeah.
I think he's the only one who jumps his seating to be ranked, or sorry, to be picked number 1 over being ranked number 3. especially because Caleb Henson has looked unstoppable this year. He even took down Rich Lovett, which was an overtime match. But you would think, law of transitive properties, Lovett destroyed Shane Van Ness, Henson beats Lovett. Betting odds to take that into account.
Yeah, except for, I believe 2 years ago, Van Ness beat Henson. So, obviously, 2 years' time, a lot changes. Guys are built differently over 2 years, but...
There's also, he did miss a lot of January with an injury, and he's
right.
entering the tournament a little bit slow.
So I think his cap is also the national championship. I think, based off what you said, Evan, with the easiest path, I think the betting line shows that because he's the favorite with the easiest path, giving him the overall best chance to win the national championship.
Yeah, I feel like we're just kind of going to be repeating ourselves with, capping it at the national championship, because most of these guys are national championship caliber wrestlers, but Van Ness definitely, his path really favors for him, and he really could, win his first national championship at 149. Now moving on to 157, Tyler Kasak was not the number one seed at the Big Tens. Became a Big Ten champion and looks really good after his injury. He missed some time in the second half of the season. Comes into the national championship as the number one at 157. Really has surprised a lot of people this year. That there was a bit of competition earlier before the season started at who would start there, and it seems like Cale Sanderson made the right choice with Kasak. But what are your thoughts on his Big Ten performance and how that could play out at the national championship?
He was very impressive in the Big Ten tournament. I think his win over Antro Taylor is probably the most impressive thing, pinning a top contender in the weight class. Also, the second. Was he injured during the Nebraska match? Was that the one he was out for?
Kasak?
Yeah, I forget how that lined up.
I'm trying to remember the schedule. So he got...
Because he has at least one victory over Taylor, and might be two.
The Maryland match.
I believe Nebraska was before that.
And let me check the schedule real quick. No, Nebraska was before that.
All right, so that means he's got 2 wins over Antro Taylor. Mind blanked on that one.
Yes, he has 2 wins over.
This is back for the Big Tens with Ja'Cory Teamer and Ethan Miller both getting upset. I think it was the quarterfinals. He avoided 2 of the matchups that were really interesting to watch. Heading into the Big Ten championship, even though Kasak's probably a heavier favorite than a lot of the other Penn State wrestlers, I think he's got the most interesting possible opponents. You got Meyer Shapiro of Cornell, that's kind of viewed as number 2. You got him versus a healthy Ja'Cory Teamer. You got him actually facing Ethan Miller finally. And even just some of those lower names, it's going to be interesting to see him go against a Tommy Askey, go against a Joey Blaze that he hasn't faced, Dylan Evans out of Pitt. There's a lot of names here that I want Kasak to face that he probably won't even get the opportunity to. So he's the one guy that I could see as the prize upset happening just because of how many guys in that 157 class that I probably have more respect for than the national average does.
Yeah, I think he is one of the bigger favorites. And in the Big Tens, kind of proved that Ethan Miller shouldn't have been the number 1 seed. He didn't have a great performance. I can't find where he finished, but I'm pretty sure he didn't finish 3rd either. So, he lost twice, I want to say. I could be wrong about that.
I believe Teamer beat him in the consolation bracket.
Wait, I just had the match against Teamer. He beat Teamer 2-1 to advance in the wrestlebacks. But I can't find where he finished. But I remember I'm pretty sure he didn't finish 3rd, if I can remember correctly. And Kasak kind of dominated his way to the championship. He proved he should have been the 1 seed, and he got the respect getting the 1 seed in the national championships. And there's some big names here, and I just don't see how Kasak, he's just looked so dominant when he's been healthy, and I don't see really where he could lose. Obviously, something crazy can happen, but I think he's one of the bigger favorites.
Yeah, Kasak really has just been on a roll this entire season. I mean, he deserves to be ranked number one. Should have been number one at the Big Tens, but doesn't matter. National championships, he's number one. And he was really just dominant there. And he's another guy that this weight class is very good. And there's a lot of names that really could surprise some people, including, the Chikori teamer, even like Joey Blaze, which we've already said. But it's a very competitive weight class. I'm excited to see Kasak maybe face some of the guys he hasn't wrestled yet. And I think that'll be a big challenge for him, but I really don't see I really don't see him not being in the national championship. I think he's the best wrestler at 157. It's close, and there's a lot of competition, but he's just been more dominant than the other wrestlers in that weight class.
All the talk on the other side of the brackets on Myra Shapiro. Keep an eye out for Ryder Downey. He's a guy that if I was making a bracket, I might have him push through the finals.
Alrighty, Evan. I will take your word for that one. But
Uncultured.
Okay. Dude, okay. All right. Moving on, 165. Mitchell
Brink wins
Messenbrink.
law.
Yeah.
I don't even have anything to really say or go over, except actually that his one match was actually a bit closer than I think people thought. His match against Mike Caliendo, it actually was, a bit closer than people thought.
Yeah, and what I think happened there was a lot of wrestlers, when you face a guy at Messenbrink's caliber, you go very, a defensive approach when you face somebody that's, outmatches you. And he gave Caliendo credit because he walked up to him after the match, shook his hand, and was like, "You battled. A lot of people don't do that for me." So those words actually might push some guys in this tournament to push more against Mitchell Messenbrink, but yeah, Messenbrink wins law. I don't really see much of a path for him to lose. There's a couple of interesting opponents that he's potentially going to face. Like he could go against Cameron Amin in the semifinal, which I hope he doesn't though, because I want that Barraclaw versus Messenbrink match
Yes.
so badly.
Yeah, you've said that quite a lot.
Yeah. Now it actually we're
Yes.
to the point where it's very realistic.
And then getting to the championship, he would go against Peyton Hall. Did they face each? I remember Peyton Hall was at the NWCA All-Star Classic, but I don't know if he faced Messenbrink.
I can't.
I can't remember either.
Either way, he's looked very good. So those are the two matchups that I'd be looking forward to. Well, three, I guess. Well, he can't face Cameron Amin, so. Messenbrink Barraclaw and Messenbrink Hall would be the two that I'd be hoping to see at the end of the night this weekend. Other than that, I don't really think there's a threat outside of those top four.
Yeah, I really like after his match. You saw the shake of the hand and stuff when he was talking to Caliendo, and then in that interview on Big Ten Network, he really gave a lot of respect to Caliendo. And something to note, Caliendo, his only two losses are to Messenbrink.
Yeah.
And he has kind of dominated throughout the entire season, except when he faces Messenbrink. Caliendo is kind of, I see it in a section of his own, and then Messenbrink, there's a big gap, and it's Messenbrink at the top. I'm surprised Caliendo's not number 2.
Yeah.
And Peyton Hall, 30-1, only lost to Terrell Barraclaw earlier in the season. So something to note in case Barraclaw faces Messenbrink in the semifinals, which would be interesting because Barraclaw probably knows more about Messenbrink than most wrestlers.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with Messenbrink, I think all of us think he'll win it. I think we're just excited to see some newer matchups and maybe some that'll be closer, like this matchup against Caliendo, but we kind of all have the same thoughts on that. So moving on to 174, Levi Haynes. It's his first year in that weight class. He's looked really good, and his loss this season came to Keegan O'Toole, who is a national champion at this weight class. But overall, what do you think of his Big Ten performance? He, obviously took home the Big Ten championship and could face O'Toole again in the national championship.
I think he did exactly what I expected him to in the Big Ten championship. He obviously won but then, dominated against the lower tier opponent and Brody Bowman. Had a close match with Patrick Kennedy, who's a guy that I think has been underrated the entire season. And then did surprise me by getting the major decision over Lenny Pinto. I thought Pinto would put up more of a fight in that final. But again, Levi Haines, he just all season he's done what you expected, which hopefully means a rematch between O'Toole and Haines in the final, which I think is probably the heavy favorite for the matchup to happen.
Yeah, I think it's the heavy favorite. I think that's what everyone wants to see. But Haines has the harder path compared to O'Toole. He, if everything goes right, would have to face Dean Hamady in the semifinals, and that could cause problems because Hamady's also really good. But Haines continues to look on another level. I think he's grown after that loss to O'Toole, and it was a really close loss, controversial as well. May not have really ended right there necessarily in most times, and in the national championship, I'm sure the review would be a lot better. So, be good to see Haines attempt to get his revenge on Keegan O'Toole.
Yeah, and I agree with Evan here. Haines did exactly what I expected at the Big Tens as well, and I have it as almost a lock that Haines will get to the national championship and go against O'Toole. Who wins that? I think it's a toss-up. I think it's going to be one of those 4-1 matchups, though. It's going to be really close. But this, if I choose what you do, Andrew, and pick the storyline, this could be, Haynes' revenge on O'Toole, and, he gets his first national championship at 174. And yeah, I think we'll see those two face again at the end of this.
If we're also talking storylines, we talked about Dean Hamady. Outside of him just being talented, coached by David Taylor knows a lot about Levi Haines. He's probably got some advanced scouting on there, so that matchup might even be harder than it seems on the surface.
That's a good point, especially since those two haven't already faced each other this year, I believe. They've not ever faced each other. So that could be one to watch for before the national championship. You never know. It's a national championship in wrestling. Anyway, moving on to 184, Carter Sirachi. Interesting matchup, actually, against Max McAnally, which, Evan, I'm going to give you a lot of credit here. You said that would be a difficult one for Sirachi, and I honestly think he shocked Sirachi as well, taking him down for the first time this season. What were your, just honestly, Big Tens now, what were your thoughts on that match and how that honestly could play out in potentially the national championship?
Yeah, Carter was impressive. Talk about storylines. He actually had a few of them in there. Well, first off, gotta say it again. Didn't get the Gabe Arnold match because Gabe Arnold decided to fold again. First match against DJ Washington was actually an avenging. He already avenged it, but one of his only two actual losses was to DJ Washington. And on top of that, they had a bit of a rivalry. They got into an argument after their last match. This time, shook hands and moved on with it. Then he faced Jackson Smith and destroyed him again. I was excited for that McAnally match. McAnally was very unhappy that he lost that.
Yeah.
And Carter talked about how he came off very well, but just wasn't able to keep up with his endurance and kind of slowed down. And sitting right there next to the mat watching it, it kind of seemed like what happened. I'm not going to say it was a bad takedown that got Sirachi the win, but it's something that definitely would not have happened against a fresh McAnally. That said, though, endurance is something you can't really train up in 2 weeks, so I think he's going to be in the same spot. Kakaisen's the one guy who was able to keep up with Sirachi in their match that went to sudden victory. So I do think it's not a shoo-in for number 5 as much as I think it'll be, you think it's going to be a favorite. With that said, I got to read this quote that he said after that match real quick. Some guys view it just like a sport. For me, it's more than that. It's my staff versus yours, my partner versus yours, my dad versus your dad. That's kind of a hard to look at. Every time Carter Sirachi speaks, it's interesting.
Yeah, you kind of have to try to go into the brain of Carter Sirachi when he speaks like that and really understand where he's coming from. And, McAnally looked good. He was able to keep up with Sirachi for the most part. But after that first takedown that he had, Sirachi was in control. I believe that was the case against Kekaisen as well earlier in the season. He kind of was in control, not a lot of points, went sudden victory, but he was the one controlling when things were happening. And, hope that you get that rematch with Keckeisen again in the finals, and Starachi could be hoisting title number 5.
I will add, Gabe Arnold's on the other side of the bracket, which means we're not getting it again.
Yeah, just we're never
Unless
gonna.
he goes on a run.
Right. The other guy's better anyway.
Honestly,
I
believe that.
think he is.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah, for that McAnally match, it was impressive to see McAnally wrestle so close with Starachi, and I think he's almost that next guy at 184 that'll take over the weight class. But the guy I'm going to watch out for is Keckeisen. These two are really close, and Keckeisen was the national champion last season at 184. And this Kekaisen's undefeated. He's the number 2 seed, so there's a very decent chance that, we see that rematch again. But that's a match, honestly, that I think can go either way as well. They just were so close the first time they wrestled this year, I believe. He wrestled him at the All-Star Classic.
Yeah.
It was.
So that's why they're both undefeated.
Yeah.
Sudden victory, it was even tighter than the McAnally match was.
Yeah. But those two wrestle. It's very close, low scoring, and obviously Starachi's going for number 5. He would be the, today. He has some interesting quotes. I'm just gonna put it that way. He says he's very into it. He likes to, he said he'd like to eliminate the seeds and just go at everyone in the 3 days, which. Okay, definitely has the mentality, but he's definitely prepared for anybody that he'll face in this championships. Anyone that goes up against him, he'll be ready for it.
I do want to mention one guy that he'll probably face in the semifinals, in Dustin Plott.
Yeah,
most of his career, actually, he was basically the Mikey Caliendo to Parker Keckeisen at this weight class, where his only losses in his career were to Parker Keckeisen. This year, the other guy also beat him.
Yeah.
But Dustin
I'm going
Plott's
to get to that in a second.
going to be a formidable opponent if he does end up reaching that semifinal.
Going back to the other guy, referring to Angelo Ferrari, that is, at Iowa, I just don't understand why he's not wrestling. I know the idea is to save him for when you have a better overall lineup, but he beat the number 4 guy in the weight class, and he held his own. He looked good in that match. I was watching that entire thing because I knew it was going to be close, number 2, number 3, probably a better match overall than the Penn State-Iowa match. And he looked like the guy that should be the starter at 184. Now, Arnold, big-time recruit, he's the 11 seed, though. So, you would think if Angelo Ferrari had wrestled the entire time, he'd be he'd be ranked a little higher. But this weight class is going to be fun for years to come.
Yeah. I think for Ferrari, it's also just in a bad spot where for Iowa, their lineup was weaker than usual, but the 2 spots that, other than Gabe Arnold, that they kind of had filled for him would have been 197. They got Stephen Buchanan. You're not taking his spot. 174, Patrick Kennedy's been there for a while. You're not taking his spot either. So,
yeah, definitely something to watch out for. And I agree. I think the other guy is better. I don't understand why Iowa keeps putting Gabe. Not that Gabe Arnold isn't good, but I do just think Ferrari is better than him at 184, and I'm confused on why he's not the guy that they're gonna put out there at the national championships. But this weight class is going to be very competitive between him and McAnally. There's a lot of guys here that could really be very good in this weight class in the future. 197 is Josh Barr, who had to forfeit, had a medical redshirt forfeit in the. Medical redshirt, what? Medical forfeit in
Mondays.
the 5th place match. But yeah, very unfortunate for him. And, he looks on to the national championships and, he's beaten the number 1 seed going into the national championships. Could he do it again? I feel like that could be a little storyline for you, Andrew.
He's beaten him and he's lost to him.
Exactly.
So there is that. I think he has a really favorable path. Facing Tucker Hogan in the first round should be a fairly easy victory. And then you look further down, could potentially either face Michael Beard, former teammate, or Stephen Little, who he beat already. So he has that, what's the word I'm looking for? He has that, I'm
You got this?
completely blanking.
You got it?
He has the the history to be able to take these guys down and then face. Thank you.
Of course.
Could face Jacob Cardenas again in the semifinals, and it would basically be a rubber match.
Yeah. Evan?
Yeah, this was one of the weight classes that kind of cannibalized itself, besides AJ Ferrari. We'll point out, Ferrari being the betting odds favorite as a weight class is kind of weird.
Yeah.
It just, I know he's got the history from a couple years ago, but this year specifically, he faced virtually no actual great competition. If I'm not mistaken, did he won the Pac-12 championship?
Yeah.
All 4 teams.
Right.
So,
Right.
what's the left of the Pac-12? Like that is. He did beat Stephen Little, but Stephen Little also lost to Josh Barr in pretty significant fashion. I do think it is that top 4, though, that's going to run this weight class. Michael Beard could maybe jump in there at some point. For me, Buchanan would be the favorite, even though Cardenas upset him that one time. My rule is, if you beat somebody once, unless you're one of those top tier wrestlers, it's hard for me to predict you to do it again in the same season. It's the same reason I actually had Bartlett losing to Mendez. So for me, I'd kind of tier rank it as Buchanan, Barr, Cardenas, space, AJ Ferrari.
I mean, I agree with you. 1, with those rankings, and 2, just the fact that I really think it'll be the top 4 that we see really in that semifinal matchup there. But I could see any of them really going to the national championship. I don't think there's really any major favorite, especially since AJ Ferrari's the betting favorite, and I'm basically mind blown by that. I don't know how, but I would have really chosen Buchanan. I think he's the best wrestler at 197, and I believe he should have been the 1 seed. I know Cardenas, again, beat him one time, but again, I think Buchanan will end up actually being the national champion. But Barr definitely does have a legitimate chance to win this.
Right.
This is a weight class. The second round is going to be really fun because you get matches like Michael Beard will have to go against, in theory, Stephen Little.
Yeah.
Those are 2 of the guys that are kind of viewed as, if anyone can jump into that top 4, it'd be one of those 2. You got the 2 brothers going at it, Mac and Luke Stout.
Right.
Interesting to watch. Pitt. And then AJ Ferrari's second round matchups against Zach Glazier, who beat him a couple years ago at the Soldier Salute finals. It was in overtime, but it was by disqualification because of a post match fight. So that second round is going to look fun for 197.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that are also competitors, including someone that you didn't name from Illinois. Zach Bronigal's always competitive, and he really showed up in the Big Ten championship this past weekend. And there's a lot of guys deeper in this weight class that are almost on that next tier, but just aren't quite there.
Right.
That it's a deeper weight class, and those second round matchups will definitely be in fun to watch. So moving on to the heavyweight, Greg Kirkvliet loses to Gable Stevenson again. Is the 3 seed going into the national championship weekend. What do you think could happen? Because I don't know if anyone can beat Gable.
Yeah, I talked a lot of trash on Stevenson for stuff not involving actual wrestling. I will just say, being there this past weekend, out of all the wrestlers, Stevenson had that star aura. That feeling when you walk past somebody who's a big deal?
Yes.
Yeah.
He had that. Walking by him a few times, I was right next to the entranceway when they walked out, and he just dominated Greg Kirkvliet. Full confidence, didn't boxed him out the whole time, didn't really give Greg a chance. And on top of that, he wasn't even satisfied with what he did there. It just feels like Stevenson's going to march right through this tournament.
Yeah, part of me wants to give Greg a chance because, we heard Carter Sirachi say today that Gable is beatable. Now, we haven't seen it in a while, him being beatable, but I feel like if there's someone else in Kirkvliet's corner that's going to help him, it's going to be Carter Sirachi. Be able to, if he fully has every guy 157 to heavyweight scouted, will be able to help him out. And it really looked weird seeing Greg Kirkvliet get dominated like that, getting taken down multiple times. It didn't look right because we've seen him dominate others like that. I think really the big matchup could be Kirkley against Hendrickson in
Yeah,
the semifinals.
that's what I think as well.
Hendrickson, if you look at the NCAA stat ratings, he was statistically the most dominant wrestler. He's had the most average points per match scored for his team. So it's not going to be a cakewalk. I've had that match circled all year also. I think that's honestly a toss-up, and it's nothing against Greg Kirkley. He's obviously a star, but this is a weight class with 3 bona fide stars in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Hendrickson versus Kirkley match will actually be more entertaining than whoever Gable faces out of those two, or if someone else is in there. But look, everyone's beatable, right? Technically, it's just it'll have to take. I don't even know, because I also want to give Kirkley a chance, but it's so hard when someone is so dominant like that and just shows it every single match. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I think it'll be tough for whoever Gable goes against.
And I was on board with Messenbrink winning the Hodge over Stevenson until this Big Ten tournament. It's just really telling that in the heavyweight weight class, when you have 2 of the most dominant wrestlers in the country and you're the minus 600 favorite over both of them, Stevenson is just on another level compared to the whole country.
Yeah.
Not just his weight class.
Definitely. That will do it for this episode of The Mat Return. Make sure to stay tuned to our coverage all week for the national championships and subscribe to the wrestling newsletter. I'm AJ Piazza.
I'm Andrew Deal.
And I'm Evan Smith.
Speeding off.